Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 1 of A Modern Taoist. And I guess we should start off with a little introduction. My name is Kit Man, and let's see, do I need credentials? I have a degree in Eastern philosophy. I studied with a Taoist master for more than 15 years until he passed away. Like many people in the world, I fell in love with and then forgot about everything that I learned because that happens sometimes in the world. I was not raised in this thought process. I was raised in a very Christian Oklahoma household. And when I say very Christian Oklahoma, I mean not very good processes through the week and then go to church on Sunday and all is forgiven. That's what I mean about that kind of a Christian household. We're not going to get into all that, but I bought into that until I was about 13 or 14. And I had an epiphany somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 years old where I was really getting disappointed in the hypocrisy of the people, the elders, the older people in the church and in my family. And I was intelligent enough and self-aware enough to see what people were doing. And so as I progressed further in life, I got the idea that I wanted to learn more about religion and theology and philosophy, but from a intellectual point of view, not a belief system point of view, from a scholarly point of view. And so I studied Eastern philosophy, and I've read every text you could possibly read, from the Tao Te Ching to the Bible and back again. And some of the things resonated. Buddhism resonated a little bit. Some of the things Confucius said resonated a little bit, although he was very conservative and very strict, was Mr. Confucius. But the Tao kept coming back, because Taoism is not a religion, it's a thought process. It's a communication between you and the path, which is what the Tao means, the path, the way to go. And a lot of people confuse Taoism, and you can spell it however you want, by the way, T-A-O or D-A-O, it doesn't matter. No one cares. If that's one of those things, there's a lot of people that want to argue about stuff like that on the interwebs. If that's one of those things you want to argue about, boy, howdy, you are on the wrong path, my friend. Because no one cares. The Tao doesn't care. Lao Tzu doesn't care. The Tao Te Ching is an interesting book, because it's not a rule book, it's not a Bible, it's observations. And there are numerous translations of it, but those translations are more interpretations, because direct translation of the calligraphy from Lao Tzu is virtually impossible into English. And I would direct you to Benjamin Hoff, who wrote the Tao of Pooh and the Day of Piglet. He also did I don't know what the word, an interpretation himself of the Tao Te Ching, and he did it as a direct translation of the individual characters. And when you read it that way, it's significantly different than the other translations that are out there. There are translations that are well received, and there are others that you just kind of read it and go, no, that's completely not correct. But I've read, 10 of them, 12 of them. I've read everything, though, right? I've read every Zen book there is. I've read The Way of Zen by Alan Watts probably 20 times. Another thing that led me back to this process of having a podcast was speaking with a Qigong instructor. And he and I had a conversation about Taoism and about the philosophy itself outside of the Qigong practice. And he said, you really should have a podcast. You know way more about this than I do. and I've had podcasts before. Nothing ever resonated with me enough to stick with it, even though I liked the topics, but they were all very secular about movies and books and sports and things. It was my need to fill a gap in my life with a podcast because I was in broadcasting and radio and televisions for so many years that when that went away, it was a part of my identity that I missed. And a weird thing happened when I decided to give up doing podcasts and give up that past and drop the things that no longer served me. Suddenly, people are saying to me, you should do a podcast again. But now it's for a different reason. Now it's not to fill a gap of what I used to be. Now it is to convey something that has at various times in my life been incredibly powerful and important to me. And like I said earlier, I, like many people do with many religions or philosophies or ways of thinking, they get distracted. They get pulled in other directions with the world around. And there were times in my life where I forgot about my master's teachings. I never forgot about him. He always makes sure that I don't. He shows up in dreams all the time. And the dreams are really interesting because they're always, you can look at it from a spiritual point of view and that he actually is coming to me in a dream and delivering a message. Or you can look at it from a scientific point of view that everything you dream is just a reflection on thoughts you have. And he happens to be the person that is the actor in my dream giving me those thoughts and reminding me of the teachings. That's okay too. So after the Qigong instructor suggested to me that I should have a podcast, initially I was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And then I talked to my wife about it. She said, sit with it a few days, see how it feels. And so I did. And then one day I decided I wanted to see what else was out there. Not that I believe that anybody is in competition with anybody else in this type of a podcast. Yes, if you have a golf podcast, you probably are fighting for listeners and viewers with other golf podcasts. But I don't believe the Tao would lead me into any sort of competition. That doesn't feel like anything that would ever pop up. But I wanted to see, if Taoism was being served in the online podcast universe. And if it was being served, how was it being served? Was it being served on a weird rock, or was it being served in a temple, or what was going on? And so I searched through Spotify and through Amazon and Audible and found a few podcasts. There aren't that many, truthfully, that are doing it in any way that's compelling as far as I'm concerned. But I did find a few, and they all had, the really cool graphics with the mountaintop and the serene water and the yin yang. And I listened to a couple of them. And one of them I felt was pretty, it was pretty good, but it didn't really hold my interest. And another one was pretty full of misinformation about Taoism. They were more about confusing it, really, with Buddhism, which is, it happens from time to time, but that's not an educated person in the Tao if you're going to confuse that with Buddhism. I mean, that's something that a layman would do. Certainly, it's very confusing to a lot of people. And I get that. But what struck me was that everybody was so serious and kind of preachy about Taoism and very monasterial, And I'm like, you guys know it's okay to have fun. It's okay to laugh. It's okay for Taoism to be joyful. And I mean joyful in a real world way, not in a churchy way, not in a praisey way. I mean, it's okay to have fun. It is not, you don't have to do all of your things in NPR voice. You know, you can have a good time with meditation. You can have a good time with the way, the path that you are walking. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to try to do anyway, is, I don't know, once a week, have a podcast where we can talk and chat about the real world and how Taoism fits in to the real world and how you can apply the lessons from the Tao into the real world. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you can have the most interesting podcast in the world, but if you're not getting anything out of it, you gotta have a sense of humor. You know what I mean? You've got to have a sense of real. So this podcast is for people that live in the real world, that have jobs and kids and bills and traffic and a dog that barks at the doorbell. And we're going to talk about Taoism, but without the constant incense and solemn chanting. Look, when I'm meditating, I've got the incense going. Sure, I do. I'm doing it the right way. But you don't need the bells and the meditating and the singing bowls during a podcast. You just don't. So we're going to laugh a little bit because Taoism is not a prison of serious. Yes, of course, there are heavy topics. There's deep philosophy. There's philosophy that goes very, very deep. It's my favorite part of it. But if you can't laugh at the absurdity of the world we live in right now, you're probably missing kind of half the point. So that's where we are. That's how we ended up here. So I'm not here to sell you a robe and a bamboo flute. I'm here to make sure you know that Taoism is not just for monks on mountaintops. It's for sitting in traffic and not turning into the Incredible Hulk. It's for letting the guy in the slow lane not drive you particularly insane. You might notice that I'm giving you specific examples because these are the examples that I have to battle. Maybe, just maybe, the guy in the slow lane is teaching you patience instead of trying to ruin your day. Taoism is for choosing not to comment on inflammatory social media posts just because you have now decided that peace in your mind and in your heart and in your nervous system is more interesting and more fulfilling and more healthy than being right. Sometimes it's for, Taoism is good for noticing. I take a walk every morning, about 2 miles. I'm trying to stretch that out a little bit to maybe 3 or 4, but right now it's at about 2 miles. And I live in an area in Oregon that has a lot of jack pine forest around where we live. And a lot of tall lodgepole pines and jack pines and a bunch of different evergreens. But what we don't have in our area is blue spruce. The nearest blue spruce forest is about 35, 40 miles away. Much higher. I live at a pretty high elevation, but the blue spruce is at a much higher elevation than where I am. And I'm out on a walk the other day before I decided to do this podcast, and I'm walking through one of these jack pine fields at sunrise, walking right into the eastern sun. And I see by itself the most beautiful little blue spruce tree out in the middle of this jack pine field where it should not be. Perfectly healthy, perfectly out of place. And that's when it hit me that maybe I do have lessons for you to learn a little bit. Maybe. Because here was that tree just doing what it's meant to do. Not trying to blend in. Not apologizing for being different. It's just doing what it's meant to do. Grow and thrive. And there's a Taoist lesson in there for you. Because that's what you're here to do. Grow and thrive. And there's lots of lessons like that out there. And that's what I'm kind of hoping to spring on you, is these lessons. And I think no better way to start, and I'm not going to get preachy and read scriptures and all of that, but I think one thing that we can probably do that would be helpful and educational and interesting is actually get into the Tao Te Ching a little bit and speak about how each chapter, if you want to call it that, stanza, verse, whatever, chapter is how it's usually referred in the Tao world, how that applies to real life. So why not just start at the beginning? And I'm going to use the Stephen Mitchell translation because it's the one that is the easiest, I think, to follow. But the very first thing you read in the proper Tao Te Ching is the following. The Tao that cannot be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that cannot be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire is when you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source, and this source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. That is the Stephen Mitchell translation of the first thing you read when you open the Tao Te Ching. Let me give you the plain English paraphrase of that. Okay? Anything you can explain completely is not the whole truth. And the minute you slap a label on something, it changes the way you see it. When you let go of needing to define and control, that, my friends, is where you sense the bigger picture. And when you're hung up on desire, when you're hung up on wanting, you only see the surface. Both the deep mystery and the visible world come from the same place, referred to in the Tao Te Ching as darkness within darkness. What it means is a place you and I cannot fully grasp, but it's the starting point for all wisdom. Trying to grasp that knowledge. That's the opening to the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu sets the tone by basically saying, and I'm giving you my interpretation here, but I'm pretty dang right. I did get all A's. He basically starts by saying, everything I'm about to say isn't the Tao itself. It's just the best I can do with words. That's pretty much what he says. I'm just doing the best I can with the words that you can understand because we can't really describe it. Some people, there's some lines in the first part that a lot of people misinterpret. They take it to mean don't talk about it at all, which is not the point. The point is to be humble about the limitations of language. that the Tao is so huge and so vast and so all-encompassing that there's not really a way for us to explain it. It is our job to try to figure it out. And that gets back to the hike in the blue spruce tree in the middle of the jack pine field. I don't know how it got there. A bird, the wind, who knows? But the second that I labeled it a blue spruce, I shifted into thinking about how out of place it was. Once, if I would have just seen the tree and let the tree be the tree, everything be everything, and it would have been fine. But myself, with words, labeled it a blue spruce and made me shift my thinking and dwell on, why is it there? How rare, how beautiful. Nothing wrong with it. But before naming it, it was just a tree. That's what Lao Tzu's talking about. The way naming pulls us into categorizing and judging instead of simply being with something. You see what I'm saying? You picking up what I'm throwing down? You get it? I mean, you don't. You might get that part of it, of course, but none of us get it. We just do the best we can. So put that into some real world stuff for you, maybe, okay? Like online interactions. If you see something, maybe you are a liberal Democrat and you see something that a Republican conservative puts in social media, and you start labeling them as wrong or stupid, immediately you've stopped hearing anything. You go into reply mode. Many of us don't read to learn anyway in social media. That's what it could have been. Oh, the gloriousness that the internet could have been. Right. But now so many people read in order to label and label in order to reply. Same thing happens at work. What if you're in a work project? You've got a partner at work and you guys have a project you have to get finished. And your partner says, man, what a nightmare this is. As soon as you say that, you've labeled it. And it is a self-fulfilling manifestation. That label starts to become the truth. And let's put it even more personal. You look in the mirror this morning. I have bad skin. Look how fat I am. Maybe it's something you think when you sit down to do your taxes. God, I'm bad at math. Or you're in traffic. Man, I hate people. These are all labels that we've given ourselves, and therefore we are that. And it becomes a cage that we have to escape. And how do we do that? Dun, 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 dun. A Taoism podcast that brings it up and points it out. The Tao is how we do it. It is the key to the lock. It's the key to the escape. So this week, here's a little challenge for you. Try catching yourself before you label something. It's something I've been challenging myself to do lately because I fell into a hole and I had to have the Tao pull me out. Try catching yourself before you label something. Let something be as simple as looking at it without calling it something. In fact, do it right now. Go out and look at the sky and refuse to call it gray or cloudy or beautiful. Just look at the sky, don't name it, and just let it be. And what you'll notice throughout the course of your week is you'll notice how often your mind wants to classify freaking everything. It does. We are in a mode where that's what we want to do. I even did it when I was looking for other Taoism podcasts. I was classifying each one as boring or bad information or that guy has a weird voice, whatever it was. I labeled them all rather than just going, okay, well, there are 6 out here and I can be number 7. I started labeling, which what happens when we label, that then leads to comparison. And then that leads to competition. And then that leads to winners and losers. And there are no winners and losers in the world. I hate to tell you this. We think there are because we have labels on things that mean success and failure. And so we believe people that have a certain dollar figure in their bank or have a certain retreat that they go to in Belize or have a big family when we have a small family or a small family when we have a giant unwieldy family. We have all these labels that other people are better at something than we are because it's different than what we are. But that's not the truth. The truth is that we simply are. Remove the labels and you just are. You're not a 50-year-old rat race guy with 12% body fat and a $100,000 job. You're not. Those are all labels that you have put on yourself and others have agreed to. And I know it's hard to do that because right now in your mind you're thinking, yeah, but that's the world we live in. Bingon, the Tao was his name. Okay, that was stupid, but I'm trying to make the point to you that the Tao is how you escape that thought. It's how you escaped those label cages. Okay? And hopefully I can help you with that through this podcast. And I will encourage you to get yourself a copy of the Tao Te Ching. There are many copies out there, many different translations. I happen to like a few in particular. I would encourage you to get the Eternal Tao Te Ching by Benjamin Hoff, because it's the one that I told you about earlier that he does directly the translation with the characters, from the characters, so which is not easy to do. There's a reason Tao is spelled Tao and D-A-O and T-A-O. It's because of the translation, the characters. There's a reason Qigong is spelled the way it is. There's a reason Tai Chi and Tai Chi Chuan are always thought of as the same thing. It's always translation stuff. Talk to any Chinese or Tibetan about Taoism or Buddhism, and you're going to find so many misinterpretations, all because it's very, very hard to translate the calligraphy of the ancient Chinese into today's lettering. It's just hard to do. Think of it like reading cursive from a 6-year-old. Nobody even writes cursive anymore. But each of our cursive is different. If you read my cursive, if I wrote the first 2 sentences of the Tao Te Ching in cursive, and then if my wife did it, you might think it said 2 different things. Maybe. Now, pretend you don't know the English language, and you're trying to translate those letters into something that you can understand. That's the battle that everyone has to fight, because the original scripts, texts, they were all written by hand in calligraphy. And so all the translations are mucho de hardo to come up with. So find one that makes sense to you and then read it and compare and see if we're vibing the same way here on the Modern Taoist. Okay? So typically these podcasts, I believe, are probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, 45 minutes long. This one may be a little shorter today because we're just kind of throwing it out to see if anybody wants to listen. But what I want to do on the next one is show you how Taoism and the Tao, by the way, there are two different kinds. I want you to separate two things. There is a religious Taoism, and then there is the philosophy of Taoism. We're not going to get into the religious Taoism stuff. Not that it is not valid, not that it doesn't have some beautiful points and some ritual that serve many millions very well. It's just not what I want this to be about. But if you feel like you want to research that a little bit, instead of researching Taoism, research religious Taoism, and it's a different thing. You'll see what I'm talking about. And if you are, maybe you're thinking about exploring Buddhism or Zen Buddhism, and you're stumbling across this word Tao, this Tao keeps popping up everywhere. Try to remember that Taoism the Tao is present in almost every religion. There's something from the Tao that shows up. But every religion is not present in the construct of Taoism. Taoism has nothing to do with the Buddha. But the Buddha does have a lot to do with Taoism, if that makes sense. Okay? So, yeah, read The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. If you're really interested in Zen Buddhism and Zen thought, it's a great book. But if you're interested in learning how being in the flow of the Tao and understanding it and learning what we're trying to learn while we're here on this realm, this dimension. On the next episode, we're going to talk about escaping the matrix. One, because if I use the word matrix in a title, boy, do I get clicks. But two, you are stuck in it. Maybe not in the sense of the movie. Maybe not in the sense of a physical stuck in it, although who knows? Maybe we are. Maybe we are in a simulation. But the Tao holds the key to that cage as well. So on the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about escaping whatever matrix might be holding you back from, what's the word I'm looking for? Revelation. Not revelation like the Bible. Revelation like, holy cow, look at that. All right? So we'll wrap this episode up, and thanks for being here for episode 1. We will try to do this at least once a week. I don't want to get into a regimented every Thursday and Saturday, X number of time, blah, 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 blah. That is not the way, because then I've put a label and an expectation and a challenge on it. So I can tell you the label we will place on it is 4 times a month minimum. How about that? Once a week minimum, and you can follow along. I am going to have a blog available as well with some different kinds of thoughts. And you can find all that at daoananda.com. That's D-A-O, Ananda. It's a combination of a Chinese and Hindu, because I just thought it was a cool nome. And it means the path of bliss. daoananda.com, daoananda.org. I got a special deal when I bought the URL. I got 2 for the price of 1. Gotta like that, huh? Saving money and passing on some wisdom. But there's a blog there, and I'll eventually put some Qigong videos up there for you, and we may even have other things too. So, daoananda.com. taoism.com, or come back here to your favorite podcast place. And thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform, and thanks again.